The cold crept into her bones long before hunger did. The kind of cold that comes from pretending you're invisible while the world moves on without you. She stood outside the diner, staring through the fogged glass at warm lights, steaming plates, and people who didn't have to count the coins in their pockets before deciding whether they deserved a meal. That night she was certain of only one thing: she didn't belong inside. And yet, one small act of kindness was about to undo years of quiet suffering she had learned to carry alone. Before we continue, take a moment to pause. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that change lives, please like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. Her name was Grace Miller, a name that felt ironic even to her. She was 43 years old, living in a small town in Ohio, and life had slowly, methodically taken everything she thought was permanent. Her husband had died 5 years earlier, after a sudden illness that drained their savings faster than she could understand what was happening. The medical bills followed her like a shadow, and when grief left her unable to function at work, the job she had held for nearly 2 decades slipped away too. One loss led to another, until Grace found herself moving from stability to survival without ever meaning to. She rented a tiny room above an old hardware store, the kind of place that smelled of dust and forgotten dreams. The walls were thin, the heater unreliable, and the mattress sagged in the middle, but it was all she could afford. Each morning, she woke before dawn, cleaned offices at night, and spent her days applying for jobs that never called back. Her meals were simple, repetitive, and often skipped. Some days dinner was just water and the hope that tomorrow might be better. That evening, she had finished a long shift scrubbing floors that other people walked across without thinking. Her hands were raw, her back ached, and her stomach twisted painfully with hunger. She had exactly $3 in change in her pocket, not enough for even the cheapest meal inside the diner. Still, she stood there, drawn by the warmth and the smell of food, letting herself imagine what it might feel like to sit down, to be served, to exist without calculating every bite. Inside the diner, a man named Daniel Carter sat in a booth near the window with his 2 young children. Daniel was 38, a construction supervisor who worked long hours and carried the quiet exhaustion of single parenthood in his shoulders. His wife had died in a car accident 3 years earlier, leaving him to raise 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Noah on his own. He did his best to keep life normal for them, but some nights the weight of responsibility felt heavier than steel beams. Daniel noticed Grace through the window without realizing why she caught his attention. Maybe it was the way she stood so still, as if afraid to disturb the world around her. Maybe it was the thin coat she wore despite the cold, or the way her eyes lingered on every plate that passed by. He watched her hesitate, step closer, then step back again, like someone standing on the edge of a decision that felt impossible. Grace told herself she would leave. She always did. She had learned not to hope for kindness because disappointment hurt more when you expected better. She turned away from the door, already rehearsing the long walk back to her room and the familiar ache of going to bed hungry. But before she could take more than a few steps, something made her pause. Daniel had stood up. He didn't rush or wave or draw attention. He simply walked toward the door, opened it, and looked at her with a calm expression that held no judgment, only concern. He saw the surprise flicker across her face, the instinctive tightening of her posture, as if she expected to be scolded or ignored. Grace felt embarrassment flood her cheeks. She wasn't begging, she told herself. She wasn't asking for anything. She was just standing there. But years of being overlooked had taught her to brace for rejection before it arrived. Daniel didn't ask questions. He didn't offer pity. He simply extended an invitation that felt so ordinary and yet so impossible that it stunned her. He gestured toward the diner, toward the warmth in the table where his children sat, unaware that their lives were about to intersect with a stranger's in a way that would change all of them. Grace hesitated. Pride wrestled with hunger, and hunger was winning. She shook her head at first, insisting silently that she didn't belong, that she couldn't accept charity. But Daniel's presence was steady, unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world. There was no pressure, only an open door. She followed him inside, her steps tentative, her heart racing. The warmth hit her immediately, along with the rich smell of food that made her stomach tighten painfully. She felt every eye on her, imagined every thought, even though no one was really paying attention. Daniel led her to the booth, introduced her gently to his children, and made space for her to sit. Lily smiled at Grace with the unfiltered kindness only children seem to possess. Noah asked her simple questions about her favorite food and whether she liked pancakes. Their normalcy, their comfort, made Grace's throat tighten. She realized how long it had been since anyone had spoken to her as if she mattered. The meal arrived quickly and Grace struggled to hold back tears as she took her first bite. It wasn't just the food, though the warmth and fullness felt almost overwhelming. It was the act of being included, of being seen. Each mouthful reminded her of who she used to be before survival became her only identity. Daniel watched her quietly, sensing the depth of what was happening without needing it explained. He talked about his kids, about school projects and small victories, about the way life kept moving even when it hurt. Grace found herself opening up too, sharing fragments of her story, not all at once, but enough to feel less alone. Time passed unnoticed. The diner grew quieter as the evening wore on, and eventually it was time to leave. Grace's heart sank as reality crept back in. Kind moments, she had learned, often ended too soon. Outside, Daniel handed her a small piece of paper. It wasn't money, it was a phone number and the name of a local church that ran a community center. He explained that they helped with job leads, meals, and temporary assistance. He didn't frame it as charity, but as support, something people leaned on until they could stand again. Grace walked back to her room that night with a full stomach and a lighter heart. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by loss. She slept deeply, dreaming not of what she had lost, but of what might still be possible. In the weeks that followed, Grace visited the community center. She found help she hadn't known how to ask for and people who treated her with dignity. She secured a part-time administrative job that slowly grew into full-time work. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. She moved into a small apartment with sunlight streaming through the windows, a place that felt like a fresh start. Daniel and his children remained a quiet presence in her life. They met occasionally for coffee or simple dinners, building a friendship rooted in mutual understanding rather than obligation. Grace watched Lily and Noah grow, watched Daniel learn to laugh more easily again, and felt something healing within herself too. Years later, Grace would think back to that cold evening outside the diner and marvel at how close she had been to giving up. One invitation, one act of kindness, had altered the course of her life. It reminded her that survival didn't have to be lonely, and that sometimes the smallest gestures carried the greatest power. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment now to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive. Before the ending, we have a special request. Please comment below and tell us what kindness means to you, or share a moment when a stranger changed your life. Your words may inspire someone who feels invisible right now. Grace eventually became a volunteer at the same community center that had helped her, welcoming others who stood where she once had, uncertain and afraid. She never forgot how it felt to be hungry, cold, and unseen. And she never underestimated the power of a simple invitation to eat, to sit, to belong. In a world that often rushes past suffering, her story became a quiet testament to the truth that kindness doesn't just change moments, it changes lives.